All right, y'all. So there's Isaiah Grant back again, traveling spiritualist, philosopher, delver into analytic psychology, shadow work. You know what I'm saying? It's done me plenty of good, at the end of the day. And I just want to share this and give this back to you guys as something that you can use to benefit your life and to influence your fate, your destiny, your telos. At the end of the day, what I'd like to talk about here quickly is to first off preface this lecture by letting you guys know, did I vote this year? Did I vote last year? Did I vote at any time in my life? No, I have not. I personally and honestly do not know really what you guys want to hear out there. So I have to speak to you about things that sometimes I see on a very introverted scale with inside of myself that will apply to you through the field of the collective unconscious. Or I have to talk about sometimes, and I think it's a very good time for me to do this now, talk about something that I'm seeing on an extroverted scale in the world around me, and that you are seeing in the world around you as the collective unconscious is directly affecting, if you will. It's directly affecting these things that we're seeing that are formal, formative, physical, and it's making direct impact on our souls. So what are you talking about, Isaiah? Where are you going with all of this? Okay, so I'm going to talk about what we're seeing in the realm and in the world of politics and how that's influencing what we're dealing with on a day-to-day, and where it is all coming from. And this is where this is going to touch you guys the most, because I'm going to be approaching this from an analytic psychologic model. Okay, so before I get to reading, once again, I don't know what you guys want to hear. I don't know if you guys want to continue to hear, because oftentimes there are no responses, there are no comments on the videos. There's a few likes, there are more views than likes, there are some shares. If and I'm just gonna say, if you find these videos of any worth to you, please like, share, comment, subscribe, interact with me. I'll interact with you. I actually have more time on my hands now than I did at any other time, because I am living right now my best life, and I'm living my goal. I'm living my telos. I've broken away from the supposed matrix, if you will, of society. We could talk more about that, but I don't want to burden this lecture with a long period of time. I really just want to get to the marrow of things. Hopefully you enjoy it. If you don't like what it is that I have to say here today, I'll have to just concede to less of a viewership, which is just fine with me, because at the end of the day, I'm here to reach a selected few out of the many. And those few, it's like the old saying says, and I'm gonna start reading after I say this last thing. It's like it said, many are called, but few are chosen. And I really believe that the path of individuation is not for the many, it's for the few, because it really causes us to take more of a responsibility over our life, over our time, and it causes us to take responsibility for ourselves. And as we do so, we're taking a greater responsibility for those in the collective society around us. Okay, and I'm doing that work here daily. I'm doing that work also in my day-to-day life. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to continue to read here now. I'm going to start reading, rather. Okay, so this lecture is going to be called The Rending of the Veil, because it really deals with this on a microcosmic layer, on an individualistic layer. We're dealing with the rending of the veil and the seeing into secrets, as I will explain here. Okay, the rending of the veil, shadow complexes in contemporary politics. Okay. In this video, I want to speak on something I've been observing with increasing clarity, something that to me is not just a political phenomenon or a cultural issue, but rather it is a deep psychological event occurring on a mass scale. I call it the rending of the veil. By that I mean we are living through a time where hidden intentions, repressed instincts, and unresolved shadow aspects of mass groups of individuals are bursting into public view. This rending is not delicate, it is violent, it is disruptive, and it could get more violent and disruptive, honestly. And it is psychological at its core. Just as every complex is at the core of every psychological complex is an archetypal core. And these things exist in the realm of the shadow. Okay? So C.G. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that comes from the archetypes and the collective unconscious, which is Collective Works 9.1, paragraph 126. Okay? Jung's warning sets the stage for understanding this rending as a collective confrontation with the unconscious. This quote underscores the urgency of recognizing these hidden forces before they manifest as chaos. Okay? Because we're if you look in just the social stratosphere in the United States, we're headed there, and even across the world. You know, a lot of people are following a lot of the trends that are coming here out of the United States that are deconstructing values that were put in place, and many will not agree with me, that were put in place to keep chaos that is just looming on the brink in a stasis, okay? In a state of order, okay? So we often speak of individuals confronting their shadow, the dark, unconscious side of the psyche, but we forget that societies too have shadows. Why? Because analytic psychology just doesn't deal with you on the inside. It deals with you and interpersonal relationships. It also deals with the group. You know, so you have one, you have two, three, and more that it deals with. You know, there's many sociological aspects of it, also interpersonal relationship aspects and personal aspects. Okay, that's why I love this form of psychology. Okay, so we have to remember that societies too have shadows, and right now we are seeing those shadows rupture, and they're doing so through the medium of politics, specifically bipartisan political identity. Okay, bipartisan, two parties, this side and people basically holding too tight to one side. What happens when you hold too tight to one side and you don't find that middle ground? You get ripped up by the other side. That's what happens. Is analytic psychological doctrine. Okay, it's straight up. Okay, so Marie-Louise von Franz said, the shadow is not only the dark underside of our personality, but also the unlived life, the possibilities we have not realized. Us getting on people's cases and looking down on people because we don't understand their lifestyle. We don't understand what they've been through. We don't want to understand what they've gone through because in some way it chafes us because we don't understand it and don't want to understand it. So we repress it into the unconscious, and the repressed shall return, as Sigmund Freud and even Jung said. Okay. So, so the unlived life, okay, deals with possibilities we have not yet realized. Okay, so von Franz's insight should cause us to consider how societal shadows reflect not just repressed flaws, but also untapped potentials, suppressed by the rigid political identities, suppressed into the shadow. Anything that you suppress, that you feel like, oh no, I don't want to look at this, I don't, this ain't no part of me, F these people, you know, you're pushing people to the side. What ends up happening is you're creating a shadow. Okay, and a lot of times people that have a real looming shadow and have a lot of unresolved stuff that they need to deal with, they seem like the most cleanest, most nicest, most greatest people on the outside. That's the face that they show. Okay, So her insight should cause us to consider how societal shadows reflect not just repressed flaws, but also untapped potential, suppressed by rigid political identities. This adds a hopeful note, suggesting that integration could unlock new possibilities. Integration is individuation. Integration equals individuation. Okay, you got to face that stuff you don't want to face. You got to find a way to integrate it and become at peace with it. Otherwise, it's bipartisan. Okay, the political sphere as a shadow theater. Okay, left and right, liberal and conservative, have become more than political orientations. They've become emotional containers for complexes. How so? They've become stages for unresolved psychic material to act itself out. The left, for instance, and the LGBTQ plus movement within it, for instance, right? Once a legitimate push for rights and recognition, has in some cases become overinflated with ego identification around sexuality. We've moved from seeking understanding, right, in both partisans. We've moved from seeking understanding to demanding affirmation of ever-shifting identity constructs, because it's always changing. If you think about it, let's just be honest with ourselves. It's always changing. We've moved from seeking understanding to demanding affirmation of ever-shifting identity constructs. The symbol of the rainbow originally was a covenant between God and humanity. And I'm not putting religion, these religious groups over, people's ideology. Have your ideology, think what you want to think, be who you want to be, right? But let's take the symbols that are being used and take them back, which is what we have to do in shadow work, which is what we have to do when we're resolving complexes, which is what we're doing when we're amplifying information so that we can know more about the root of where something comes from. Okay, it's taken from a Christian use, okay, of the rainbow, right? The symbol of the rainbow was a covenant between God and humanity. Also, we can look at the female messenger of the gods, which is also, divine communication between the gods and humanity, of Iris, which is a rainbow goddess. Okay, it definitely represents a divine bridge, and it's been reduced to a brand of sexual preferences. Something sacred has been hijacked. Now, before you get all triggered, right, I'm gonna hit on these Republicans as well, though, too. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not for or against either side. Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, but do as thou wilt, but harm ye none. Okay? Because when you start harming people and pushing ideologies on people, whether you're a Republican or whether you're Democrat, and it interferes with the life, the well-being, and the peace of mind of individuals, that's where you have some karmic issues to deal with on the other side. Okay, so Edward F. Edinger said, when an archetype is activated, it tends to take over the personality and produce inflation or possession. And let's remember that archetypes carry their opposites within them, right? So it's almost as if they have the way to find balance within them, but because of our human tendencies and because of our shadow repressions, it's rare that we look to the other side and try to find that third thing that's going to balance the crisis out. Okay, so my annotation here is that Edinger's concept of archetypal inflation explains how the rainbow, a universal symbol, has been co-opted by ego-driven demands. This resonates with the issue we are discussing by shedding amplification upon the psychological misstep, encouraging reflection on how sacred symbols lose their depth. The right, on the other hand, particularly in conservative white circles, has erupted into a movement that is being called Black fatigue, a backlash against having to hear about racism, inequality, or history's sins. And sin, mind you, is ignorance. It's failing to see the other side of something. Oh, this is only true. Oh, but this other part of it we're just not going to look at. Okay, this ignorance that we all have, every single one of us, including myself, has areas where I'm not looking at something else. When if I did look at some other side of an issue that I'm dealing with, I could balance it out and find greater wholeness, happiness, peace for not only myself, but for others within my respective sphere of influence. Okay, so this talking about history sins and how people aren't looking at the past. Oh, the past is the past, just leave it alone. Let's not even think about it anymore. But this isn't fatigue, okay? It's resistance. It's the shadow of ancestral guilt, denial, and superiority complexes masquerading as indifference. And once again, what was originally a meaningful term, Black fatigue, a book written to articulate the emotional weight of systemic racism on Black Americans, has been hijacked and twisted into a tool of avoidance. Okay, James Hillman said the shadow is not just evil, it's everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. And that's in his book called Meeting the Shadow on page 9. And I put an annotation here. Hillman's perspective clarifies that Black fatigue as resistance is a refusal to face collective guilt. This quote sheds light on the right's reaction in the new use of the term Black fatigue as a shadow projection, making the psychological mechanism accessible and relatable. Okay, in both cases, left and right, we now see the same psychological process at work. Okay, complexes hijack meaning. They through groups, they take a symbol that is psychologically highly charged, and they take it as their own and they do what they want with it. They do that with movements that once meant something, and they dilute it for their own use. Okay, so the complex, a charged cluster of repressed emotion and memory, cannot create anything new. Okay, a complex cannot create anything new. It only twists what already exists. Think about this if you have any religious training, for instance. Okay, God, for instance, right, or the higher self, we could say, right, the one creates the many. Okay, and then the many has to do with demons and all the slag, all the klipoth. If you subscribe to Kabbalistic theory, it creates all these many different things and uses them as vessels. Okay, the devils and demons, for instance, cannot create. They only possess, distort, and obfuscate that which has been created. Hijackers. The complex doesn't speak in its own voice. It puts on the mask of a symbol that had meaning, and it wears that symbol like a costume. It disguises trauma as ideology. It hides rage beneath activism or tradition. So on both sides, what we're really seeing is not people standing on principled ground. We are seeing complexes on a stage performing, and their constituents are dancing around like puppets to the tune of the demonic complex. They're a bunch of puppets on the left, on the right, whether they like it or not. Okay, and that's because they're not seeing the other side and finding that middle ground. All right, complex is hijacked. Okay, then the ego believes it is being righteous or truthful, but it is possessed. So the equation here is self-righteousness equals inflation. If you're just self-righteous and you think that you have no wrong and you think that you're just 100%, there's inflation at work. Okay, it is speaking from woundedness, not wisdom. Woundedness, it means you still need to heal. You still need to heal. You still need to find some tangible ground of reconciliation. Okay, so it's woundedness, it's not wisdom. Robert A. Johnson stated that the shadow operates like a psychic immune system, protecting us from what we cannot yet accept. And this is in his book, Owning Your Own Shadow, page 45. So Johnson's metaphor of the shadow as a defense mechanism helps us to understand why these complexes manifest as self-righteous ideology. It invites people to emphasize, or empathize rather, with the human struggle behind the political posturing on both sides, fostering a deeper connection. You know, we need to not hate people that do this, but we need to understand them. The right needs to understand the left needs to understand the right, and then temenos, a vessel of transformation in between them would form. And my God, isn't the left Americans? Isn't the right Americans at the end of the day? So, I write another footnote here that this brings profound relevance to what Christ spoke as he was being crucified and mocked upon the cross. He said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." Think about the degree of understanding that one had to have while being while having his life essence bled out, and following his telos, his destiny out, and being mocked while doing so, while having compassion for those that were blinded and just didn't understand, people that were stuck in their ignorance, right? Something to think about. It, and I'm referring to an anthropomorphized figure that represents the ego self axis. You would have understanding and a link to the ego self axis if you understood this. You see what I'm saying? So and just like in the individual psyche, where a repressed wound shows up in projection or addiction or compulsion, okay, these societal eruptions are symptoms of an unintegrated collective trauma. When you don't deal with your traumas, they show up elsewhere in your day-to-day life. And you're wondering, why am I drinking every day? Why am I doing blow every single day now? You know, why am I feeling these urges to lash out at people that I don't need to be lashing out at? This wasn't me before, but like I'm becoming ultra violent. I'm becoming extra violent. You know, it's because you're not facing your shadow and assimilating these issues and dealing with them in a more head-on way. Okay. The collective unconscious then erupts. Okay. Jung warned us of this. He said that if the inner situation is not made conscious, it will appear outside as fate. Oh, it just happened upon me. It just happened to me. Life keeps happening to me. These different situations just keep happening to me. Well, they would stop happening if we started doing the work. All right. And this is what I believe is happening right now. The internal contents of the psyche, repressed guilt, unacknowledged wounds, spiritual confusion, are manifesting externally through chaos, ideological extremism, identity inflation, cultural disintegration. The veil between inner and outer is being torn open, and lest us all and let us all be informed that the term the veil corresponds directly to the covering that separates the mass man from the inner temple. Also, the covering that covered the Ark of the Covenant. When that thing fell down, or if people approached it in the wrong way, individual died. And what happens if you see God? God resides, the higher self resides beyond the veil. The uninitiated see God, they die. Meaning, you're changed. You can no longer see things the way that in the way that they were. That could be a good thing in the form of enlightenment, but in a large way for the unenlightened and the uninitiated, it represents a death. They no longer can see or be as they were in their life before. They suffer. Okay. So it basically, the veil, okay, represents and corresponds directly to the covering that separates the mass man from the inner temple, the holiest of holies, in which the sacred objects are contained. Those objects that are direct representatives of the imago, the divine father and mother, Abba and Abba, right? And even the self, which the initiated priests were only permitted to enter and interact with, which intimates a need for understanding, without which one will fall into projective identification with one side or the other, and under the contagion of the power of such forces that are being interacted with and used by the initiated, the archons, which are rulers, which could even correspond to governmental agencies and individuals that want to hold greater sway over your life and over your time and over your precious psychic libido, so that they can hijack that and take that and have you doing things because you're dealing with repressed stuff that you haven't dealt with. Okay, this is the power being wielded against the mass man by use of imagery, symbolism, the media, etc., in tandem with the unresolved energy that is being exuded from the shadow and the unresolved complexes brought about by trauma. Carl Gustav Jung says the world hangs by a thread, and that thread is the psyche of man. And this is in the book The Symbolic Life, Collected Works 18, paragraph 1358. And I write here about this, that this powerful quote amplifies our position here that we must all personally take, which encompasses the stakes of responsibility of psychological reckoning, judging your psychological position. This adds gravitas or weight to the point being stressed, as I am telling you all that the chaos that you are seeing in the world right now is a reflection of humanity's inner state. And I am urging you all to take this issue seriously by taking personal inner responsibility. It's almost as if a great exorcism is taking place and the demons are wearing familiar faces, and many cannot tell the difference between their genuine soul and their hijack complex, or if the one causing all the ruckus is a single political leader or group that is funding all of the confusion. Tell me that isn't the case. Tell me I'm a liar and I'll shut up. Okay? And Yella Yaffe says the archetype is a force. It has autonomy and can seize an individual or group. It could take total control. Take you unawares. Okay. And this is in her book Jung's Last Years at page 112. Archetypes, archons, I write, are devouring forces, always assimilating the lesser of the same type. Okay, they work in phylums. The higher basically will hijack the lower, and lower than that. You can see this in the grimoires of the older magicians. You know, demons, great archdemons have lesser demons that they control under them. Okay, and these are representative of the psychological influences that take control of men and their complexes. Okay, so I'm basically saying all this once again to encourage self-reflection. It's very important, self-reflection. As an INTJ, I personally am engaged in self-reflection all the time, but many of the extroverted types, they're trying to see maybe what's going on in here that maybe they could see more of. They want to see it being worn on people and things on the outside. They want to see it in the things they buy and the things that they do, and etc. And even for me, it's anecdotal to take some of that medicine and try to do the same thing, which is what I'm doing here. I'm taking some of my musings and bringing them out into somewhat of a tangible form, although it's data, although it's electronic, for you here now. Okay. So the misuse of sacred symbols now is what we're going to talk about. The rainbow, once a mark of divine reconciliation, is now being used to signal sexual exhibitionism, not spiritual harmony. The phrase black fatigue, meant to open empathy, has become a dismissal of the same thing, of empathy, a sigh of annoyance at the reality of history and its current aftermath. These are not accidental misuses. These are simple symptoms of archetypal possession. And here's the thing. The archetype, when not consciously related to, possesses. It overtakes the ego, and we get ego inflation. The archetype, yes, even the Gnostic ideas of the ruler archons, uses symbols, language, and institutions as vessels. And once it has them, it does not uplift, it distorts and uses those individuals for its own predestinated goal. Marie-Louise von Franz said, when an archetype is not consciously integrated, it possesses the individual or the collective and leads to destruction. Now, I write here that note, if not destruction in its utter sense, it at least leads to some fate, destiny, some type of telos. And I would like, for those of my tarot savvy friends here, I think of the 10 of swords in the tarot when thinking of this, because the card displays a scene in which one person has been terminated, 10 swords in his back, right? However, this represents this represents the end, the fate, the destiny of an idea which has reached its fulfillment and attainment. And the end is not eternal in and of itself. It is a start to a new beginning. Even so, energy cannot be created or destroyed. This quote that I just read from Marie-Louise von Franz comes from the book Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, page 89, okay? So von Franz's warning reinforces my point about the destructive and greatly manipulative powers of misused symbols. This quote adds a cautionary note urging all to approach symbols with a soberness, reverence, and awareness that protects one from being swept up in the collective distortion. Why? Because when you look at Carl Jung's diagram of psychological complexes, right, which are autonomous, okay, they have almost like a will of their own because of the archetypal core. You have images and you have symbols that bridge directly into the archetypal core, which act as trigger points and will emotionally arouse individuals into behavior, okay? I'm gonna throw a picture of that up as well, okay? So where do we go from here? Okay, what are you saying with all this, Mr. Grant? What, like come on, bro, get to the point, right? Where do we go from here? I believe that the only path forward is one of discernment. So getting this type of knowledge, this type of information, looking into it, understanding it, so that we can move forward, right? And with that discernment, let's get into some depth of understanding so that we can enact what it is that we must to find balance, right? We must begin to differentiate the real from the reactive. Separate the soul's cry, your pain, from the complex's scream, okay? What's trying to be said in all of your turmoil, right? And what is the right way to go about balancing this, okay? This is the grand goal in shadow work. Reclaim the symbols that have been hijacked, not by taking them back politically, but by understanding them psychologically and spiritually. Return them to their source. Return them to the source that is responsible, okay? What does the rainbow mean at its deepest level? It is a harmony between heaven and earth, a covenant of peace. What does black fatigue mean truly? It is the emotional consequence of generational struggle, not something to be weaponized. When we lose the deeper meaning of symbols, we become possessed by their shadows. Edward F. Edinger spoke and said, the task of the individual is to become conscious of the archetypes and integrate them rather than being possessed by them. And this is in Ego and Archetype, page 107. Edinger's call to conscious integration here offers a practical solution to archetypal possession. This is my lecture's call to action, hopefully inspiring you, my viewers, to engage in personal and collective shadow work. So in closing, I'm saying here, what I'm witnessing, and what many of us with eyes wide opening are witnessing, okay? Or with eye wide open are witnessing, is not just a culture war. It is a mass psychospiritual reckoning. And the chaos we see on the surface, the shouting, the protests, the identity clashes, gender and racial turmoil, are secondary symptoms of something much more primal. And if you think about it, on the primal level, it's just all about survival. And people on the primal level are really acting as animals with no real human awareness. There have been occultists that have stated that many are not even human beings. Those that we look around, oh, everybody's a human being. Many are not even human beings because they have not tapped into that potential and burned away a lot of the dross that is necessary to come within the realm of human thought and being. Okay, something to think about. The complexes of a culture long asleep to its shadow are now breaking through the thin veil of its persona on the lowest level. It's two things at once. On the lowest level and on a higher level are peering into the highest causal level of all phenomena, in which the root cause of all social and soul-based issues proceed. This is big if you can see the higher and root meaning. The latter applies only when one can see the deeper symbolism behind the normalized programming. Stop going along with it and look towards the root of where it comes from and take it back to its source. It's not you. It doesn't have nothing to do with you. And then you'll be free. And then you'll find a balance point on which to proceed. And then you'll be unburdened. And then you'll find peace. Okay? The curtain is being pulled back. And what we do now, whether we choose conscious integration or blind reaction, which is that latter blind reaction, is an earmark of the autonomous psychological complex in the form of behavior. I'm going to throw that map up or diagram up of Carl Jung's psychological complexes. Okay. So, so the curtain is being pulled back, and what we do now will most definitely determine whether we fall into deeper fragmentation or rise into a more truthful unity. But let it be known, the complex cannot create. It only twists, obfuscates, and possesses. Okay? And if we are going to move through with this, with any integrity, we must stop looking only at the content of the argument and start looking at the energy and unconscious intent behind it. This is where the real work begins. James Hillman says, the way to the soul is through its shadows. And this is in his book, The Soul's Code, page 178. Hillman's poetic insight closes the lecture with hope, suggesting that confronting the shadow is a path to the soul. This possibly leaves us with a sense of purpose, encouraging us to see the current chaos as an opportunity for growth. So if this message has resonated with you, take a moment to reflect, share, and discuss with me what you've gotten from it. This isn't about left or right. Once again, I care less about bipartisanism, about really honestly about the world. I care about the people in the world. The world referring to the way that the world is, okay? The way that the world has come to be in its formalized way, okay? Because it's more taking our life energy and putting it in the hands of those that would like to use it for their own agenda. And at the end of the day, this sounds in some ways conspiracy theory like, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't really like conspiracy theorists. However, it's really important that you guys know that there are some of these things that can be unearthed that are true because they point right back to the way that our psychology works, and they're using our psychology against us. Okay? So share it, discuss it with me. I'll be more than happy to speak to you about what I think on this subject, as you speak to me about what you think on this subject. This isn't about left or right again. All right, it's about waking up, okay, as individuals and as a species to the shadow within, and then from the shadow within to understanding and embracing and assimilating our humanity. Okay, like, subscribe, share if you like this. Hopefully you're blessed by it. Thank you for listening. Isaiah Grant with Thinking in Circles, and I am out.